welcome to the 2022 BIPOC Perioperative Leaders to Know. My name is Brewster, staff writer for Whitman Partners, and today we welcome Sheffield, interim leader for sterile processing and current assignments at St. Jose O'Connor Hospital. Welcome, George.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So first question is, what drew you to sterile processing and drew you to leadership in particular?
I started off, I was a corpsman in the United States Navy. I was a surgical technologist and just an instrument tech. And sterile processing was kind of like part of being a scrub tech. So we not only, assisted during surgery, we also put up the instruments. Years later, it kind of morphed into its own identity. I was in, let's say, materials management, and then I went to work for medical manufacturing, and we actually serviced hospitals with customized surgical kits, so to speak. Well, I saw an opportunity in sterile processing again, this is some 20 years later, and I got back into it and kind of took a manufacturing approach to it and found that the same thing we did in manufacturing, we can actually apply some of these principles in sterile processing. Hard sell in some cases, but the bigger the facility, probably the easier to sell because they have the infrastructure to support that kind of quality approach. Smaller facilities, it's a little bit harder to approach it that way. But I believe in I call it the VAF, vision, alignment, and execution. So I believe that any entity or business has to have a vision, and if they don't have a vision, they can't have the alignment, and without the alignment, you can't execute. So I kind of approach each assignment that way, and I'll ask my future employer, what's your vision? And a lot of times I get kind of deer in the headline looks. No one's ever asked that question, but I like to ask it just to see, what is it that you're looking for in an interim leader or in your permanent leader? What are your goals? What's your methodology to get to those goals? And oftentimes I find that just does not exist. And so we have to work, together as a team to identify what those goals are, exactly what you're looking for. And a lot of times they're kind of straightforward. We want everything to be perfect. And I'm like, yeah, so do I. But, we strive for perfection. For me, it's not the final destination. It's a lifelong quest, seeking that perfection.
A great way to put it, to strive for perfection. How has the COVID pandemic impacted your approach to leadership?
Initially, it was kind of rough. We were, because of the downsizing, limiting the case volumes, and laying off staff and farming them out to do testing for temperature checks and things of that nature. And knowing it was going to come back, but just kind of afraid that people would just stop working in sterile processing and find other careers. And we're still kind of like in that dilemma. There's certainly a labor shortage, and that is still being affected by COVID. And so we find that we're having to rely more and more on travelers or agency type employees, which really affects the quality, of the work. You can't replace, a 20-year employee. They know the ins and outs of the department. And in some cases, I've been up to 70% agency staff, in a hospital, in a sterile processing department, and probably 35-40%, could be in surgery. And it makes it very tough to manage with that transient kind of workforce. So that's how it's kind of affected us. And that's not just, Houston. I mean, that's everywhere I go. I see the same thing. I have my colleagues reaching out to me, George, do you know where we can find some people? What agency can we use? And it's just that's a problem. I don't think it's going to take a few more years for that to hopefully settle down. I think that, COVID, we've learned to kind of exist with it. And, Lord knows I've had my fourth booster, and now I found out I have to have my fifth. So it's going to be like an annual kind of like a deal, I think, for a COVID vaccine. And I think that people have just, accepted the fact that it's here. and we just learned to exist with it.
Yeah, for sure. That we even were able to create a vaccine as quickly as we could is like
Absolutely amazing. I mean, I think I got my first COVID shot, I think in December of whatever year it was. It came out, poof. 2 weeks later, I had the first vaccine. I do remember that, and people were nervous about it. And I'm like, I've had so many vaccines in my life. I'm like, I wasn't worried about it at all.
Right, because you were in the military.
Oh, yes. And when I was in the military, before I gave vaccines, I didn't even know what they were giving me. So, looked at my shot record and I'm like, what is this? And there's still one I can't identify. It's some kind of a antibiotic, that they give to all recruits or when you go into boot camp, because there's people from all over the country and they give you this one big shot, and I guess it kills everything. But yeah. So,
Another one of my questions that's further down the list is connected to what you just talked about, the labor shortage. And you said that you think that it'll probably work itself out in a couple of years, but do you think there's anything that administration or leader can do to help that, or do you just feel like it's just gotta even out over time?
I think that, one of the things that leaders can do is recognize that there's, even before COVID, there was a shortage of sterile processing professionals, in the just, nationwide. I think compensation is one piece of it. I think growth is another piece. I think recognition is a big piece. It's kind of like the department that's forgotten about, and the only time you get recognition when something is wrong. And that's just kind of a negative way, to approach a department. And there's, I don't see any goals. Like, the OR has goals. Like, let's improve our turnover time. Let's improve our throughput. And we're always seeing awards given to the nursing staff, the Daisy Award, this award, and very few other departments in the hospital are recognized for what it is they do. And I think, like respiratory therapy, I mean, they did a tremendous job during COVID, and very little recognition compared to nursing. And they were intricate, I mean, into, the welfare and the recovery for some of these patients that, had COVID early on. So I think that recognition is a big key in getting perioperative services as a team to be totally engaged. That comes from PACU, that comes from anesthesia, that comes from the scrub techs, from the nurses, from the physicians. It's a team, but it's acts in silos. And I think that's the biggest drawback, in perioperative services. They call it periop, I don't know. It's like what I refer to United States. I call it the fragmented states of America as opposed to the United States of America. It's kind of like my just analogy.
Yeah, I mean, it's accurate, unfortunately. Have you ever experienced discrimination or witnessed discrimination, and how was it handled?
It's kind of, um, yes, I have, and it's one of those things that it's hard to describe, because in some cases it's kind of an elitist kind of like a deal, kind of like a caste system, where I'm the orthopedic surgeon and you're the nurse, or you're the scrub tech, or you're the whatever, and so you get that kind of a elitist kind of like feeling. It's kind of, I don't know, snobby sometimes, if that's a correct way to use that. Um, Not too much overt discrimination at all. I think that people do have certain stereotypes. If I can get on the phone and talk to people, and I show up and I get that look, it's like, you don't look like we thought what you would be. And I'm like, well, what was that? And I kind of have fun with it. But I'm used to that, and especially, folks from the East Coast, not actually not from the East Coast, from the South. They expect someone, of color, of what have you, to have a certain kind of speech pattern. And I said, well, I was raised really on the West Coast. So, it is what it is.
Yeah,
But
totally.
yeah, it's not really, it's not, I mean, actually, I'll tell you that the southern states are actually probably better than some of the East Coast states, as far as that goes. I would say Boston, I could look the other way. I would say that, I would prefer Mississippi over Boston, to be honest.
That's interesting that you say that.
It's weird. You can go into New York, and if you go into Long Island, deep in the Long Island, you're like, oh my. I said they have the very wealthy that basically, if you're not from there, you're not from there, and you'll recognize that immediately. This is a true story in New York. My wife and I, and my wife is fair skinned, and we were in Manhattan, and we were in the Soho area or something, and it was getting kind of dark. And I said, hey, we should go ahead and get back. She said, why? We're having a great time. I said, well, we won't be able to get a cab after dark. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, look, they'll pick you up. They're not going to pick me up. And so we're waiting, it's dark. We're trying to get a cab, and sure enough, no one stopped. And I said, go across the street and you hail a cab, okay? And so she went over there and she hailed a cab. Bam, cab stops. She points over to me to come across the street. The cab driver takes off. True story. This is maybe about 12 years ago.
Crazy.
So that's the kind of stuff I tell people New York that, and they actually say, yep, that's about right.
Yeah, I mean, not imagining it. Okay.
Okay. So definitely, as a if your skin tone is darker and you're a male, you do get treated differently, and that's kind of like a little hesitation. It's kind of funny. My half brother Ed was at his had his wedding, and Beth, my sister-in-law, and they're white from Chicago, and we've never met their family, and so we show up to the dinner, and the mother, I thought she was going to have a heart attack. It was so comical that my brother busted out laughing. And it's like, guess who's coming to dinner? So you do get that kind of like that, but once you really get engaged into the assignment, that goes really out the window. It's about what you can do and how you represent yourself, and people get to know you as you. And I really like to see that transformation take place. It doesn't take long at all.
That's good. Um, what about a lot of the politic issues for the last, gosh, I guess probably 4 years? Some of those social issues have started coming into the workplace. What are your thoughts on how people can kind of rise above that?
That is extremely challenging. I think that the people, younger than myself, I'm going to say 15 years younger, are probably more adept at dealing with those situations than I'd say I am. I struggle a little bit with that. And it's like how to be right all the time, and with all groups of folks. And I take these courses, and every time I take another course, I'm like, really? And you almost don't know what to say sometimes. And in unionized environments, versus non-unionized environments, there's definitely a difference. It's like your hands as a leader, your hands are tied. You can document till you're blue in the face, and take that to your whoever you report to, human resources, and it doesn't mean anything. And so holding people accountable is difficult. I guess the only thing you can really do is like something really, really bad, egregious. People are caught smoking, or, they're come to work, intoxicated. Even that can be a problem. Um, um, with dealing with unions, you have to get a union rep and all this other stuff that has to go on with that. Um, Attendance is probably the one thing that you can probably count on if they have an attendance record. I mean, attendance policy. Some hospitals, I won't name the hospital, a very big system on the West Coast, they do not have an official attendance policy. So, I mean, it's a very, very large group, the largest hospital group on the West Coast, not to be named, but they do not have an attendance policy. So that makes it very subjective. And people do not get terminated for that reason. You know, what is excessive?
Wow.
Yeah, it's challenging. And so what's the sick call? I mean, how often do people call out? All the time. So
Wow.
that makes it challenging to for a workforce to you know, to provide good quality care to any with that kind of a rate. I had you know, I've had a really two great kind of like mentors. The first one I mentioned is named Nick Mendez, and Nick was my boss when I worked for a medical manufacturing company governed by the FDA, which we service hospitals. And Nick, let me put it this way, he was the really, really anal, and he critiqued me, and you know, I took it the wrong way initially. And you know, I thought he didn't, you know, didn't like me or something like that. And he was always picking on me and comparing me to this other guy in Dallas, and he's doing great, and look at you, and blah blah blah. And but he really made me like really hunker down, really watch, you know, the way I wrote, the way I spoke, the way I approached problems, taught me a lot. And, you know, I could not thank this man enough for showing me that, you know, you can be anything you want to be. And I started off as a supervisor for that company and ended up to be a regional director nationwide. And I did that within 4 years. And it was because of Nick. The other was when I first finished college, I worked for Enterprise Rent a Car, kind of like the same kind of deal. And I opened up the 100th branch of Enterprise, and my boss was Lenny Almanek. And their idea was like, hey, George, you know, we're going to promote you to assistant manager, and, you know, here's your salary, and you're going to get, you know, 1% of the gross after the first $20,000. And all we want you to do is go out there and increase the fleet. And I don't care how you do it, just make it happen. And so it was just giving me like this freedom to be this entrepreneurial person, and just using, you know, whatever gifts you had to promote a business. What really, and I think companies don't do that enough. They ask how to make things better, but they don't implement these ideas from the folks that actually do the job. And rarely have I seen this practice other than, you know, those two type of companies. And they have that kind of drive. Enterprise definitely had it. That's why it grew to be the largest rental car company in, you know, in the world. So, you know, people make organizations great. And it's their engagement in those companies. When you water it down, bureaucratize it, and you give these evaluations that I call it the Boy Scout, Girl Scout evaluations, are you loyal, thrifty, and brave, that doesn't relate to your job. And people look at that, and you're checking boxes, you know, adaptability, you know, it's like, well, what does that mean? And, you know, if you're a nurse, I want to be graded on my profession as a nurse, not, you know, am I adaptable? You know, am I honest? You know, what kind of questions are those? But those are what we see now in evaluation performance appraisals. And it's not job specific. It's just the same questions for everybody. I think that the mentor has to, you know, show interest in you. Okay. If they're not trying to, if they're not asking you, what do you want, you know, what do you want to do in life, or what do you want to do with this company? If they're not asking you that question, then they're not to me a good leader or a mentor. They're not trying to help you grow. And I think that, you know, you have to give some, you know, invest in your folks. And so that's where I you know, I basically, when you believe in me. And, you ask me those kind of questions, I'm gonna bend over backwards, for you. When I feel that, it's just that you don't care, I don't see you, you're not engaged, you don't call, we don't have one-on-ones, you don't set mutually, I call it goals, for me, you're not interested. So I think that's the kind of mentorship that I like. I do that with my staff. I call it reasonable expectations for performance. But back to your point, I think for mentors, to be engaged, to be involved, to talk to staff, and to be transparent. I think that's probably one of the biggest keys, to be transparent with your staff, and with all your employees.
Well, that was the last question. Thank you for joining us. I really enjoyed talking with you. I loved meeting you guys when I do these interviews. Fun for me. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.